Good morning, girls. Welcome back to the subject of productions and operations management. We are dealing with unit number 4, and that is process selection. This is the 4th unit and almost the second last unit of your SEM 5 syllabus of productions and operations management. Process, we all know, is the transformation of inputs into a particular output. When you want to change some inputs into particular output, you need to have a process for it. There has to be a series of stages. Using those stages, we can change the inputs into the set of outputs, and you cannot randomly select this process. There is a systematic way, there is a scientific method of selecting the process depending upon the product or services that you want to offer the customers or maybe to the market. And that process selection, how it is done, what are the factors, what are its main aspects, what type of processes are available, how many options are available to the manufacturer for providing the product through various processes. All these we are going to study in this particular unit. As far as the first two parts are concerned, we have introduced simply to few aspects. I'll refresh it for you and then we shall start with the new concept. Right, these are the contents of the unit. That is introduction we have done. What is the process we have done? There are various functions that are carried out when we take up with different processes. That is also we have done. There are two aspects of process, that is process planning, right, and process selection. Process planning we have already completed in the previous lecture, and that is that the two aspects that we have dealt, the whole process designing and then comes up the process designing. We have also checked out with the process selection and key decisional areas in the previous lectures, right. This we will be checking out in the further lectures to come. Just quickly let us refresh the thing that we have done in the previous lecture so that we can connect today's concept also. In the previous lecture, we have already introduced ourselves to two aspects. What are those two aspects? As I told you, it is process planning and process selection, right. Process planning includes process designing and operation designing. Now, what is this process designing? It is mostly concerned with the overall sequence of operations required to achieve the product specification. That means whatever the major stages are there, how the process will be conducted, that planning is done at this initial stage. What are the equipments that you may require, what are the workstations, what type of the processes or stages may be there, right, how much quantity is to be produced, everything, what will be the layout of the plant, everything is decided here under the big heading of process planning, right. That is what we take it before we initiate with any kind of manufacturing. Then comes up the next aspect, that is operation design. Now, operation design is a part of process planning, process design. What it is concerned with? It is concerned with individual manufacturing operation or maybe stages. It actually checks that how many manpower is required, how many machines would be working at each stage, and likewise we try to manage with the whole process of production. That is what is known as operation design. So it is concerned with the design of individual manufacturing operation. It examines the man-machine relationship in the manufacturing process, and operation design must specify how much labor and machine is required at each stage. That is what I told you, that suppose if a process may for producing a product, there may be a single process that has been selected by the manufacturer. Now, for producing a process, suppose Z manufacturing process has been selected. This manufacturing process, for that whatever equipments you need, whatever layout you need, whatever machine power, everything whatever you need, those all things are being planned out, and that comes up under the process design. But when we divide this Z type of process into different stages, say it undergoes 5 different stages in this process Z, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, at each stage is considered to be operation. right? And that operation, how it is designed at first machine, suppose at first stage, whatever the number of people are required, or maybe whatever the equipments are required, that is being worked out here under the operation design. And that is why it is the two aspect of process planning, that is process designing and operation designing, right? The next aspect that is said to be process selection, that is, this is the core of the whole chapter that we are dealing. What is process selection? It refers to the way of production of goods and services is organized. It is the basis for the decision regarding the capacity planning, facilities layout, equipment and design of the work system. Process selection is necessary when a firm takes up production of new products or services to be offered to the customers, right? We have studied this earlier, that what is process selection? Process selection means there may be multiple type of processes available to produce a single product, but that has to be decided by the organization or by the manufacturer as to how or what process actually he wants to select, which tells us about everything about the process, say from the capacity planning till whatever the whatever the type of people, equipment, skilled labor, what type of raw materials, whatever is required, that is being decided in this process selection. We have also studied the key decisional areas, right? And in today's session we'll be learning about the factors that influences the process selection. See, anything cannot be produced with a single process. There are options available. And because when the options are available, you must have learnt under planning that when alternatives are available, you have to decide on the alternative. You have to select one alternative out of it, and you have to, and that alternative is selected which gives you the best result, right? So that selection you have to do, that process you have to select. Suppose if we are producing a product, we have got suppose 3 alternative ways of producing A, X, Y and Z. That means it is all up to manufacturer to see that whether he wants to go for X process, whether he wants to go for Y process or Z process, depending upon multiple factors. There are so many factors. Here we have quoted upon suppose say 8 to 10 factors, but there are so many factors that affects this decision, and those factors will be learning one by one. So what are the factors influencing process selection? See, you think logically that if you want to undergo any kind of manufacturing, then there are so many things, starting from raw materials till the volume of the product that you want to produce, the specified product you want to produce, everything you have to consider. And then at the end you can select that, okay, now if I want all these specification in my product, which would be the best production process out of X, Y and Z? And that is how the logical decision of selecting the process is done, right? So here we are going to study few of the factors. Say suppose volume to be produced, right? What type of volume you want to produce? Suppose if A is the product, then A, what volume do you wish to produce? Say it is 200 units per day. That means if the unit is working for 7 days or maybe 6 days, that means 1200 units should be produced at the end of the 6 days. That means that much demand should be there. Then that volume which is the best to produce this volume of, that means 1200 units of product A, if you want to produce, then which type of production process will help you out to produce this 1200 units? So that is why volume is a determinant, is a kind of factor that we need to consider. The choice of process highly depends upon the quantity to be produced. As I said, sometimes if a few process may not allow the bulk production, suppose if you want to have 200 units per day, the demand of A unit is such that you wish to have 200 units per day. Now if the process that you are selecting may not be allowing you to produce even the 100 units, the process may be very good, but it may be slow enough, it may be not giving you the bulk production, then at that time that may be a wrong choice. If you select out of X, Y, Z, if X you are selecting and it is not giving you the bulk production of 200 units, then it will be a wrong choice. That is why the volume to be produced, the end product that is to be produced, that has to be considered first, right? Then comes up is raw materials and supplies. That means if you are producing a product, what set of inputs, what set of raw materials will you require, what type of supplies will you require, that is also to be decided. So many manufacturers depend on raw materials supplied from outside, that is we call it outsourcing, right? Suppose if we are producing a product, I'm going to continue this a product as the example, right? So supposingly if we are producing a product, right, for that we need some set of raw materials naturally. Now these raw materials are such out of which subcomponents, there are subcomponents of the a product, and all these components cannot be produced by a single manufacturer, so he highly depends on the supplies, or he has to depend on outsourcing of these supplies. Now suppose some factors are such which may not allow you to have the outsourcing done. Supposingly take the current situation in which everything stopped within this 2, 3, 4 months, right? The economy was very sluggish everywhere, the production was almost nil at that time. If you are depending, and if all of a sudden, suppose in lockdown, there was a lockdown, and then there was unlock system in which everything gradually had to open up. Now if you wish to start up with production, then you had to depend on the outsourced material that suppliers were supposed to supply it to you. Now the condition on the supply side may be that they are not producing right now, or they may not be having the enough bulk of raw material or supplies that you need. Then at that time that may hinder your production. So whatever the process you may have selected may not be the worth, or that may not be the perfect one for that. So in that case you have to select such a kind of process in which there is, in further topics we will see, in further points we will see that the process should be such in which the machines are not idle, the people are not idle, at the same time we are making the best use of whatever capacity that we are utilizing, or whatever the facilities that we are utilizing. Everything should be at work, or else it will increase the overheads. So raw materials and supplies plays an important role in determining what type of process it should be. Many manufacturer depends on the raw material supplied from outside, as I told you. Some of the factors that can delay or hamper regular delivery schedule also. So if the supplies are not approaching timely as needed, the possibility of shutdown or a major slowdown in manufacturing process can result into heavy losses gradually. Eventually, if you depend highly on outsourced material, your product is such for which you have to get everything outsourced. Now if this outsourced material is not coming to you in time, then what happens is either the unit will get slowed down as far as manufacturing is concerned, or it may, in the worst cases, it may have to shut down also. So that incurs into heavy losses eventually. So considering this factor, the decision related to process selection may be done, right? Suppose X is such a kind of process from where you need all the outsourced materials, right? Y may be such a process in which the subcomponents can be made in-house. Then you have to see it. Though X may be relatively easy because you are getting everything outsourced and you are just going to assemble it, as compared to Y. But Y, when you are depending on yourself, it becomes pretty easy to control and smoothen the cycle. So these things have to be considered while selecting the process. So we have checked out with two factors: volume to be produced and raw materials and supplies that on which the manufacturer depends, right? These are the factors that affects the process selection. Third one is machinery and equipments. Now how these affects, let us see. When a manufacturing process involves complex machines to complete production, a temporary malfunction or even a breakdown in a complex piece of equipment can affect the manufacturing process. Naturally, thus identifying means of improving efficiency of all working parts of the production promotes a continuous and more efficient operations. So such process may be selected. That means we have to select such a kind of process in which we have to see that all the equipments or all the machinery or maybe the stages are interconnected, that we know. So even a little breakdown in one machine may lead to the hampering of the whole production cycle. That may be the case and that may happen. So we have to see that how much we can afford it, how much breakdowns or how much say malfunctioning we can afford, how much we can verify or how much we can make it, those things are to be considered, and then we try to select the process, right? Then comes the facilities of the factory, overheads and utilities. Manufacturer depends on the utilities like power, cooling equipment, lightening the workspace in their factories, etc. Even a temporary shutdown of the power supply or lack of steady water supply can impact the production, thus affecting the manufacturing processes. Naturally, you have to highly depend, many of the units highly depend on such kind of utilities, such kind of facilities, like say provision of the water, enough water, provision of the power supply. In that case, if you need continuous power supply, and if there is a shutdown of even 2 hours, load shedding of 2 hours, that means if you are not getting the electric power for 2 hours, that will actually hamper the whole production cycle for that day, right? So those things have to be taken care of, and then the cycle has to be, or then the process has to be selected. Moreover, management style can have a significant impact on the production in both negative and positive way. Thus it is required to check the availabilities of the facilities, whatever overheads are being count on, right? Or how, whatever the utilities that are being used by the manufacturer, everything has to be taken care of before selecting the process. So any Tom, Dick and Harry, without taking any calculations, or maybe without being meticulous, if you are trying to point out on one particular process, then that may be a heavy loss eventually. That may be a wrong decision in a long term. That is why all the probable factors which are visible to the manufacturer should be studied first, and then he should select the process. What type of processes can be there, what type of selection, or maybe say options available to them, that we will study in the further part of the unit, right? So let us go to the next factor, that is said to be requirement of the product. That means how far the product is requirement, or what are the specifications that are required in the product, that should be taken care of. In say, in the case of what type of quality do you want, what type of functioning of the product do you want, what type of accuracy matters, right? In that case, you have to use such a kind of process which gives the whole set of specification. Or else only if we just go for affordable process and we don't check out the accuracy, quality, functions of the product at the end, then what happens is that product will not do good in the market. So you have to consider this, that if the product is such which requires a set of specification, but your process is not providing that set of specification, then generally those type of processes should be avoided, and on the contrary, that kind of process should be selected which gives us all the specification. Next comes up is minimized idle time. In the previous slide I told you that you have to check out that, see, every minute counts in manufacturing, right? So if you are wasting the minutes, or if you are wasting the time there, that means you are increasing the overheads. Idle time increases for so many hours if the machine is not to the work, right? Then what happens is the raw material gets stuck up, then maybe say labor which are actually not giving any kind of productive use of their time, on the contrary you have to pay them. All these things count. So you have to see to it that the process selected should be such which gives us the minimized idle time, or for minimized time it is idle. Otherwise it may be a great fear for the manufacturer, because for any accidental reason, if there is idle time, or if machines are not at work, or workers are not at work, that's a different thing altogether. But for most of the time in the manufacturing cycle in general also, if the idle time is too much, that means you are not making the use of the capacity that you have, and that may be a real problem for the manufacturer, right? So that should be considered. Next comes up is providing flexibility. Very, very important. Your process should be so that provides you with the flexibility. Flexibility in what? In say increasing or decreasing the volume of production. It should not be so much rigid. The process that you select should not be so much rigid, because rigidity leads to non-flexibility naturally, because rigid itself means there are no chances of changes, whereas if the demand changes, if the raw material status changes, if the labor problem or maybe anything related to labor changes, there may be a requirement in changing the setup of the organization. And if your process is so much rigid, you will not be able to make any changes. In that case, it will be very difficult for the manufacturer to go ahead with the manufacturing. So there has to be a little bit of flexibility provided in the process, and that should also be considered. Let us go to the 8th point, safety consideration. The name itself tells you the process may be very affording, the process may look very economical, but safety wise it may be very dangerous for the people to work on. Then such type of process should be avoided. The next comes up is skill requirement. Few processes may look very economical from at once, right? When you are having just a look at the process, then it may look that okay, with the unskilled labor also we will be able to produce very economically, but at the end actually the product requires a little bit of polishing, or maybe it requires the little touch of skilled labor, then it gives a better result. Then that should not be avoided. So skill required in the product, that should also be considered while selecting the process. Next comes up is technology. Technology is very vital in today's era, right? So some units in which the setup is such, the existing unit, the setup may be such wherein the new technology may not be at all introduced. Then in that case the process may demand for new technology, but the existing setup is such which may not allow the technology to get entered in as the part of process. Then that should be also considered, and then the overall changes should be made. Next comes up is layout. Layout means this is also one type of determinant, because layout is what? Layout we have studied. It is internal arrangement of the facilities that we use for production. So if the layout is not suitable for any kind of process, right? Process, suppose XYZ, we continue with the same example, that A is to be produced, XYZ are the alternative processes available to us. Out of them we are going to select. Now out of these three processes, X is such which requires the horizontal setup. That means X requires a kind of setup in which you want to have everything on the ground floor, and that too connected with each other. That means in a single setup you want to have everything, every process, every operations to get over. Y may be such a process instead which may not require the space, or may not require the horizontal space. Even in the vertical setup you can continue with the process. Then in that case, if now it depends all on manufacturer that what type of space is available, what type of layout he wants to use, and then he should undergo, or then he should select the process. That means these are such kind of factors. See, if you try to understand the concept, and then if you try to relate it with whatever concept that we are dealing, the main thing should be in mind that what we are doing process selection. Then for selecting a process, you have to like make yourself manufacturer, you have to assume yourself as manufacturer, and then you start thinking that okay, if I am a manufacturer, if I have got the processes or selection of the processes, options available to me are this, now what type of things I have to consider before selecting the process. Then ultimately all these points can be remembered, and it can be memorized very easily. So not for these topic only, for rest of the things that we have studied up till now, it is very important that you stick, or you are very clear with the fundamental concept. If you are very clear with the fundamental thing, then everything related in the chapter or in the unit can be associated very well, and you actually don't need to memorize things or mug up things. You just relate it and things will come easily to you. I have been constantly telling you that though you may have your books with you right now, few topics are such which I have added additionally in the units or in the slideshows here, so that you can understand the things well. So in that case you have to be careful that you will be sitting with your text there, you will be sitting with the write-up material there. Please prepare the notes for it. At least the summarized portion of each unit should be there before you, so that ultimately we can make the best when we are learning, right, or when we are making the preparation for the exams. So please see to it that you are not avoiding any point, because any point can be a part of question. It may be in the form of the long answers, or it may be in the form of say short note consisting of 7 marks at a time. right? So you have to be careful. Once you are done with your summary of each and every unit, it will be very easy for you to go through then with the lectures that you have already seen earlier, right? So these are all the 10 types of factors which affects the process selection. Now what we are going to do is, we are going to even introduce ourselves in this unit with the process strategy, right? With the process strategy. That means, what is process strategy? A process strategy is an organization's approach. See, strategy is in Gujarati what we call it Vyuhrachana. It's a specific plan, right? એવો પ્લાન છે કે જે સ્પેસિફિક છે, કોઈક એક સિચ્યુએશનની અંદર તમારે સ્ટ્રેટેજીઝ બનાવવી પડે. It's not a common planning, right? When you are undergoing such a certain situation, at that time you have to take up with specific plan, and that specific plan requires so many things, and that planning, specific planning, timely planning is said to be strategy, right? Now here we are talking about process strategy. This is altogether the different point. Up till now what we have seen is, we have seen with production or process planning, and we have seen with the process selection concept. Process selection will continue further also, but before we go with the further processes, what are the different types of processes and what are the advantages, disadvantages of those process, we have to even take up quickly a note on process strategy, right? So process strategy means, divide this word into with two different meanings. Process, we already know it, right? It's a kind of stages, or it's a kind of way through which we are turning inputs into particular set of outputs. And strategy means, for specific reason when we are planning, for specific situation when we are planning, it is said to be strategy. Now if we join these two words, that means process strategy, that means it is a type of a spatial planning related to process. Who does this? Then definitely the top level management does this. A process strategy is an organization's approach to process selection for the purpose of transforming resources inputs into goods and services. The objective of process strategy, pay attention to these lines. The objective of the process strategy is to find a way to produce goods and services that meets the customer requirement and specification within the constraint of cost and other managerial limitations. Means, why do management need to have the process strategy with it? Because with the particular strategy that it has in mind, it can produce the goods in the most economical manner with whatever the equipments and limitations that it has, and not even foregoing the customer requirements. That means whatever customer requirements are, that too is kept in mind, the specification is kept in mind, the cost aspect is kept in mind, all the managerial limitations are kept in mind, and then the strategy to select the process is being, strategy is a way, plan through which it can select the best process, right? The process selected will have a long term effect. That is why it has to be taken up properly on the efficiency and production, flexibility, cost and quality of the goods produced. Hence, it is very necessary that a firm has a sound process strategy at a time of selecting the process. Process strategy is nothing but an approach of management towards selecting the process. I hope I am making it clear. What is process strategy? It's an approach of whom? Approach of top level management. Related to what? Related to selection of a particular process for the manufacturing of some type of goods. What do it consider in it? Why it is called strategy? Because we consider the long term effect of it, that whatever we are selecting, whatever process we are selecting, that has a long term impact on the whole existence of the organization, and at that time we cannot select on the whims. We cannot select on, today I have got this idea, so I'll select with this process, tomorrow I may change the process, and day after tomorrow altogether I may be having a different idea of the process with me. Then this cannot be done, and that is why process strategy is a way, it's an approach of management to select the process properly in the organization, because it is the process through which we are manufacturing the tangible goods or maybe intangible services we are creating, and that is offered to the customers, which gives us the profit ultimately, right? So that has to be done properly. Now, when we are having the process strategy in mind, we have to keep two things in mind. That means when an organization is making the selection of the process strategy, that what type of process strategy should we adopt, then at that time it has two things in mind: make or buy decision and factors affecting it. That means if I am going to produce a type of goods, right, and being the manufacturer of this A type, I have to see that what type of raw materials will I require, what type of equipments will I require. Now out of the, suppose I told you in the beginning also that a component or a product may be requiring 4 or 5 subcomponents. Now whether I am going to make all these components in house or whether I am going to outsource it, because there are only two sources of getting the raw material. Either I depend on suppliers, that means it's outsourcing of the component, or what do? I have to manufacture it by myself. That is said to be make or buy decision. So any process strategy depends on this. It's a basic foundation decision or question that is being answered by the management, that whether we want to produce everything, that is said to be make decision, or to buy say everything, we will just assemble it, or it may be say buying the components, part component are being bought from outside, that means they are being outsourced and then they are assembled. That totally depends on the management process strategy, and that is why two things are mentioned here, right? So make or buy decision is referring to whether we are going to buy everything from outside or we are going to make it. It's very important. So we'll just have the overview here. Make or buy decision means the first step in the process planning is to make or buy decision. It involves considering whether to make or buy some or all the products or services. Manufacturing firm might have to decide whether to purchase certain parts rather than to make them. Sometimes even the firm may buy all the parts from outsourcing and simply perform only assembly operation. That is what I mentioned just a couple of minutes back. Buy decision reduces or eliminates the need of process selection naturally. It's as simple as cooking your meal at home. That means everything you require, if you are going to have the 3-course dinner at home for your guest, then everything is going to be either cooked by you, or a partial things you are going to get it from outside, right? You are going to order it and you are going to get it. It is as simple as that. We can relate this example very well with make or buy decision. So it's the manufacturer's decision to see that whether everything I want to get it from outside. Suppose if the guests are there in the evening, you come to know very late in the evening and there are no chances of cooking at that time, then what you will do? You will order the food from outside, right? You will order everything from outside and you will be relaxed and you will be saying that okay fine, nothing to be cooked at home and we'll get everything from outside. That's a buy decision. So no need to worry about any supplies, no need to worry about any ingredients whether present or not, no need to give up any time. So actually it's not selecting the process. When you are buying everything, you don't have to undergo any cooking process, right? So you don't have to think about the process then. But if you are making a partial meal at home, that means if you plan out that okay 3-course dinner, out of 3 course at least 2 I am going to make it at home and 1 I'll order it from outside, right? So dessert I'll be ordering from outside in the form of ice cream. Rest of the 2 courses I am going to have the starters and the main course I'll be preparing at home. That means that is a making decision. For that, whatever you are going to have in the menu, those things you have to prepare it, and those things are to be prepared with a simple process there. Then at that time you have to select your recipe and then you plan out with your food. Same way in the manufacturing organization also, when you are making, this is the first step, that whether we want to get everything from outside, that's a buying decision. That means no process selection is required. But if you are going to make in any case, then you have to make the selection of the process. That is very obvious, right? So if you now just go through the slides that are given here, it becomes easy to understand. I am not going in very much deep because with this particular example, I think make or buy decision should be clear. We are moving towards the next part, that is factors to be considered while making or buying decision, right? If, see, same example we carry forward. while making or buying the decision. What type of things you have to keep it in mind? Available capacity, expertise, quality consideration, the nature of demand, and the cost. That means if you are preparing the food, if you are a very good cook and everything is available, the capacity is available, you are expertised cook, you have you want that no, everything should be homemade, that means the quality is at the prime say priority, then you don't want to bargain on that. You will not get things out from outside or from any hotels. The nature of demand, that means if it is demanded early, or that means it is an urgent thing or not, and how cost effective it is, whether you produce it or whether you prepare it at home is cost effective, or whether you get it from outside is cost effective. So all these things you have to consider, and then the organization makes make or buy decision. Same way as we can continue with our own example, right? Non-economic considerations are also there, like availability of the suppliers for outsourcing. Again, I relate the same example. When it was a lockdown and every hotels were closed, there was no option other than depending on your own self. There was no chances of getting the food outsourced, right? Next, desire to specialize in a particular field of manufacture. See, many times manufacturer wish to have their own proficiency over some kind of production. They don't want the interference, or they don't want anybody else to know the unique selling point, or maybe the specification that it wants to get in the product. He does not want to share that. He wants to keep it confidential. Then at that time he would not get things from outside, rather he would prepare it at home, that is said to be in-house. Control over design secrets, as I told you, he wants to keep the designs with him, he wants to keep it confidential, then also he will not declare it or disclose it, or he will share it with his suppliers. Availability of the research and development facilities, everything is available in-house, why to depend on outsourced material? Say reliability of the outside suppliers, it may so happen that many times the outside suppliers are not timely, they are not giving you the qualitative product, that may not be affordable also at times. Then you have to think of getting things in-house, right? Lead time for procurement versus lead time for in-house production. That means if you see many times we compare that getting food from outside may be very time consuming, rather it's better to prepare it at home, or vice versa. That means it depends on the lead time. Lead time is what? The time lag between the things ordered and the things we get. We have studied this in the unit number 1. Lead time concept we have studied in unit number 1, right? So it's what? It's a time lag between what? Between whatever you are ordering and whenever you are getting those orders back. So that's the time which should not be too much. If that increases, what happens is the productivity will be nil at that time. We will not be able to take up further processes. So it's very important to consider lead time when you are making or buying decision, when you are taking, rather making or buying decision, right? Then comes up is delivery schedule to be made. Naturally, if the fast delivery is to be done and you cannot make it with the less labor or less capacity with you, then at that time definitely the answer would be that we'll get it from outside, we'll assemble it and we'll get it to the customers, right? And employees preference for particular nature of work. See, many times employees or the labor are very particular of getting their own proficiency or their own skillfulness on the product. They want that this thing should be done, should be manufactured in this particular way only, and there should be a personal touch for it. Then at that time this is very applicable to services, right? So at that time what happens is we will try to make things within, or it may be in-house decision, and will not go for any say outsourcing. So these are so many factors that we must consider while before taking the process strategy, right? That whether we want to go for making decision or whether we want to go for say buying decision. So this we have studied, this partial thing we have studied before taking up the actual say strategies. After considering the above factors, managers are required to make decisions regarding when to make the entrepreneur select a make option and when he can go for buy option. When he can go for make option. Make option means પોતે બનાવવાનો નિર્ણય ક્યારે લે છે? Everything in-house. When higher purchase price per unit, right? When he tries to buy it from outside, it may be costly. Next, time availability. When you have enough time with you, why to get things from outside? Let us produce by our own. Required facilities and capacities in-house. Everything, every equipment, every machinery, everything which you need to produce something is available in-house. Why to get it from outside? Say control over quality. See, few manufacturers are very rigid about their quality and durability and all those specifications. They don't want anybody else to take up, as I told you earlier also. So at that time, if he wants to have total control over the quality of the product, main product, then he'll not even go for buying it. Preserve trade secrets and design secrets. Naturally, when he wants to keep it his trade secret and he wants to keep the process confidential, then at that time he will not take the buying decision. The next comes up is savings of transportation cost. Many times he may feel that transportation cost may be very high as compared to preparing it in-house or preparing in-house, then that would be a costly affair, and then he will not prefer that. And here the next situation is when to take the buying option. Suppose per unit cost is less. It's like preparing the thing at home may be costly, because we may not have all the specifications required or all the equipments required at that time. What we do is we may have to it's better to get it from outside rather than preparing it in-house, right? When requirement is low, you want things are say only on the order basis, the demand is not continuous, not perennial, then at that time setting up the process may be longer and a costly affair. Next, ability of supplier to supply at low cost. The supplier can give you at low cost, he can give of higher quality, and even the fast delivery is offered by him, then why to go for in-house production? When patent belongs to supplier, now only supplier can produce, you cannot do it, it is his patent right on production of some kind of subcomponent, then at that time naturally there is no option, rather than there is no option of making, we have to depend on buying decision. When opportunity cost of producing is much higher than buying, that means if you are producing something is really costly, then to get it from outside, then that opportunity cost has to be considered, foregoing cost has to be considered. When there is no need to maintain the secret, the commodity is very, or the product is very common in nature, so many multiple suppliers are there in the market, then at that time there is no secretive thing about the product, then you can just, it doesn't matter whether you are producing or you are getting from suppliers. Next, when the items where there is not enough capacity to make it, naturally we don't have the enough capacity, we don't have the place for it, we don't have the layout setup for it, we can just assemble it, then at that time there is no option then buying it. When the item does not have perennial requirement, perennial means continuous requirement, your items need nothing, and it's on order basis, it's a seasonal demand, and you don't have the time for, or you don't have that setup for seasonal demand, you may be already occupied with the perennial supply of the other product, then at that time you can depend on buying decision. Next is, in the next session we will be studying the process strategies in detail. That means what we have done right now today is we have completed with the process strategy, factors affecting the process selection. Process selection, as I told you, will take further also. Then in between we have taken up that when a process is to be selected, there has to be a strategy that has to be used, and that is said to be process strategy. Process strategy depends on two things, two decisions, whether you are making it or you are buying it, and the factors related and situations related to it we have studied today in detail, right? When we meet in the next lecture, what we will be doing is we will be taking up with the strategies in detail, that what type of strategy that can be undertaken or can be chosen by the management. There are generally 3 types of strategies, but that detailed study we will be doing it in the next session. For now, what we have done today, I'll just quickly recap for you. Process planning and process selection. These are the 2 main aspects of process selection unit, right? This unit. Now when process planning is done, two things you have to keep it in mind. It is the process design and operation design. When it comes to process selection, there are so many things that will come up one by one, but once you want to select your process, then you have to check out first initially with the factors that are required, that what type of factors you need to study, and then we decide on process selection, right? Those factors we have studied. After that, there is a process strategy term that has to be clear, that management has to decide on some kind of specific strategy related to the process, and there are 3 strategies. But before that, what has to be kept in mind, that whether you are making or buying it, and in what situation you can make or buy. So these things we have studied. Whatever the strategies are there, it may not be available in the text, but I think it's important. It's a relative, and it's a relative concept of process selection, and that is why we'll be studying in the next session, wherein we will study the process strategies in detail. As I told you, there are 3 strategies, and we'll be studying them in detail. It's interesting to learn about the strategies. So by the time we meet next, it's a goodbye from my side, and take care of yourselves. Thank you.